Well,
Sorry.
No worries.
The morning person. Do we have a...
Get a shot of you on the plow, Steve.
we're going to be spending our 40th anniversary in Maui in a couple weeks.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
What part, do you know?
Yep.
You been before?
Yep.
So talk a little bit about how buses, the design and the structure changed after the 1971 crash.
Well, after the 1971 crash, the school board hired an engineer to come up with a better body. And Wayne Body Company come up with what they called the Gunnison package, which had twice as many roof bows and side posts to support the top of the bus, because that was one of the things that really collapsed in that bus accident, and added rivets and so on and so forth. And we kept those bodies until we put together, well, I was fortunate and I got on a committee to do the Colorado minimum standards. And when we done the Colorado minimum standards, one of the things that we looked at was the integrity of the bus in a rollover. And they we came up with the load and rack test, which would not allow so much deflection in a rollover. And that's when we got away from the special built buses. And what that done, though, is it made all the buses that were sold in Colorado to meet those specifications. There were a lot of other things that were incorporated in the buses, such as automatic chains. High back seats was probably the best one to compartmentalize the people in case of an accident. And like I said, we did look at seat belts, but they could cause more problems than not. In fact, one guy said, with the younger kids swinging the buckles, and of course, inspections for Colorado, there was no inspection at that time, no yearly inspection. And we did put together a yearly inspection that Paul said still working today. Other than that, we spend a lot of time on driver education, because of course the bus is only as good as the driver, and pupil training, student safety, I guess is what we'd call it. We done a lot of seminars at the state on student safety and on bus safety. Driver safety, because of course that's the key, is the bus driver. I mean, it's kind of like a gun. The gun won't hurt you. Anyway, and other than that, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, kind of demonstrate the original bus, how widespread the rivets were compared to today after the crash.
Okay, on the old ones, the rivets were not near as close, and so they had a tendency to rip out. And inside, and I hope this one had it, but they put the panels all the way back instead of this way, so that they would, in an accident, they wouldn't rip out and cause what they call a cookie cutter effect. And so that's one of the things. And of course, they increased the rivets inside too to hold the panels up so that they couldn't come down on the youngsters. And one of the things that we looked at with the high back seats too was if the roof did come down, it was going to hold it a little higher, give the students a little more room.
So refresh my memory, how long were you the transportation director for RA1J?
I was there for 35 years.
Okay.
With the school district when I retired. I was what they called a foreman when that bus accident happened. It then moved on from there, and the school board done a lot. I mean, in fact, I couldn't have done what I done without their total backing. And of course, administration, Jim Pendergraft was awesome. And they allowed me to travel to do some of these, to learn too, and to help other districts with any problems they had.
Oftentimes after there's a tragedy, people look for a silver lining. Was this a silver lining of the accident? Just much safer buses after that?
I think there were a lot of really good things that come out of the accident. I mean, it was a terrible tragedy. I still don't go over Monarch without thinking about that. But increased driver safety training, increased student training, increased vehicle safety, just a lot of things that come out of it that were the silver lining, like the inspection. They hadn't been inspected before. Afterwards, they were, and little things like increased lighting with the stop sign that comes out and the lights flash. We didn't have those then, and just a whole lot of people that wanted to help.
Is it fair to say that your role and work on the committees that developed all this, is that kind of a high point in your professional career, being part of that?
Well, I'll tell you, the high point in my professional career, I think, was when I was elected the first Colorado Transportation Supervisor of the Year. And then the second point was when they named this safety, school bus safety award after me. That was probably my second one. But I think that my whole professional career, right after that accident, I told myself, I want to do everything I can that this doesn't happen again. And when I retired, I think I retired with thinking that I had done what I said I was going to do to help student safety.
And here in Gunnison, you knew, if not all those kids, you knew all their families, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. The coach that was killed was a good personal friend of mine. The kids, I knew them, and like I say, I still don't go over Monarch without thinking about it.
Yeah, me too.
And that was one of the things that at one of these meetings, one of the guys said, he said, you know, when Paul talks to us about it, he does it with a tear in his eye. And like I say, when I retired, I think I done all that I personally could do, and I felt good about it.
Good. Thanks, Paul. Great. Very good. Well, let me ask you about that. Almost 50 years ago. What do you remember about that day and whatever you're comfortable talking about? So.
Well, it was a beautiful day. I mean, it started out definitely very nice. Wrestling with Billy Miles, and went to his house. His mom took us down to the school and started out great. And then it was kind of a long trip to the top of the hill, whether it was experience of driving or not. But it took a long time to get to the top of the hill, you know, and kind of made you wonder why is it taking that long? Because it just, you wouldn't expect it to be such a long drawn out trip and slow. But then we hit the top, and then the day kind of changed at that point, going down the other side. And back in those days with a standard transmission and a 2-speed axle, it was in evidently the high side of the rear axle, which is 2 gears, and there's a worm drive, and then when he tried to shift it, it ended up being in the middle. So then you didn't have any driveline pressure to help slow it down. All you had was the brakes, and coaches getting down on the floor and different things happening that pull the emergency brake. Well, that just kills the driveline, and it's just emergency brake around the driveline, and that'll kill the engine and things like that. Well, I don't know how all that went, because I was enough further back. I mean, they say that there was quite a bit of a roar going on, that they had to kind of settle people and tell them to shut up and settle down. But I don't even remember that. I just remember that we had trouble coming, you know. The bus picked up speed, and there's reports and things about the bus stopping, going down the other side. And I don't even remember that. It just, why if you got it stopped, did you ever start it again if you weren't understanding how it operated? That didn't even make good sense to me looking back on it today. But at that time, you're a young kid, you're bulletproof, you're ready for a day of football. You don't care. You're going to play ball. But looking at it in my life history, and working for the city of Gunnison as a fleet manager, and making sure police cars and fire trucks and different things that I've been involved with from time to time were safe, and never want to see anything like that happen in our little town, again, because it turned our town in those days upside down. And a lot of people, and even a lot of people that aren't here anymore, but it's still, their life was changed permanently. It was just a done deal. But yeah, I'm glad that I've been able to be a part of the foundation and make sure that there's scholarships and things that people remember the ones that were lost in that wreck, because there was a lot of good buddies that was the last day you got to see them.
Yeah, it was a tough time, as we both know. Being a professional fleet manager and mechanic your entire working career, and knowing what you know now, are you pretty comfortable with the safety standards, at least on Gunnison buses or Colorado buses now?
Well, I think they're doing the best they can. Everything is going so fast today, the technology and things, that you just got to be careful, because sometimes you don't know until it does crop up, and you know, certain things get hit and pinched, you know, and you never know what it's going to do on the other end. You know, there's just a whole lot going on, and to be a wizard at all of it, I mean, they're doing the best they can to make it safe and right, but sometimes you just don't know, and that's why there's all these recalls on our new cars that you need to come in and get this changed or this changed, because things happen, and whether you have control or not, that's what happens to teach them.
Yep.
Which sometimes it's a sad story that somebody gets a blunt of the education.
Going back to the day of the crash, after the crash, do you recall where you were, what happened, how you kind of ended up? Or
Wes Marshall and I were the first ones to Salida Hospital. Kenny Sack used to drive a semi in this country and hauled hay, and I worked for him, loaded his semi with bales of hay, and he picked up Wes Marshall and I at the accident scene and hauled us in his pickup truck to the hospital. And I didn't know what was wrong with me at that point. I just had no control over my right leg, and I had a broken hip, but I didn't know. I didn't know the adrenaline and all that. They took me to the hospital and they x-rayed me and set me out in the front room, and I hung out there with people coming and going from the wreck, and people looking and people hunting people, and yeah, I was there long enough, and then I just kind of went into a roar when the adrenaline ran off, and I just started screaming, so they had to do something with me. And I ended up having my hip socket, my pelvis was broken in 3 places, so it was amazing. I was up and walking on it and tried to do different maneuvers and stuff, and then I just fell down. That was it.
Adrenaline was probably
evidently holding. Yeah, that's what was holding it.
Yeah. Pat, you feel these days there's enough attention being given to school bus safety?
All you can do is hope so. You know, we try to put on a program to assist, you know, and give a award every year for, you know, the people that step out and make a difference and be as good as they can be. You know, I understand everybody has their own things from day to day, and no different the way the world's been the last year or so. It just makes things tough, and people have a lot more things on their mind than just that, and trying to keep track of it and taking care of our kids at the same time. You got your job cut out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think 50 years from now, particularly because of the work of the foundation, you think at least people here in Gunnison and surrounding communities will remember September 11th, 1971 for decades and centuries to come?
Well, as long as people keep working with us and carrying the torch with us, I mean, the cemetery and the monuments that we've been able to put up, I mean, I don't think those things will be taken down or taken away. So if they care enough to look into it, they could find out about as much as they want to know.
Good. Thanks, Pat.
You bet.
That again.
Yeah, the rivets in the new stuff are all put closer together like this. And the old ones, I would say they were probably somewhere in that range, 2 rivets that far apart, and they put these rivets in between and just beefed it up and made it stronger. Inch and a half where it used to be 4 or 5 inches in between them.
Yeah. Okay, first and last name, and what's your position here?
Okay, my name's Paul Morgan. I'm the Transportation and Facilities Director.
Okay. Paul, talk about, you've been here long enough and you've heard the stories from almost 50 years ago now. What does it mean to you to be working for a district that, at least in Colorado, was really at the forefront because of the tragedy in 1971, making school buses a lot safer than they were before?
Oh, it's everything. It's starting with Paul Medina all the way through. There have been 2 other directors before me, and that high standard that Paul set, and to continue that on, it's an honor to be part of that team.
Is it fair to say that Colorado has the most strident standards for school buses in the country, or amongst them, or?
You know what? Because they followed what Paul set up with his team, yes, without a doubt, we have the highest standards of the whole country.
What features can you point to in modern days that were lacking back in 1971 that might have resulted in a different outcome than we're talking about today?
Sure. If you look in the cockpit right there.
Just leave me up there. Yeah, sure.
Okay. That had an old manual transmission and just regular brakes. This bus, we can stop and slow this bus down with two different engine retarders, parking brake, and the regular transmission and regular brakes. That other bus that back in the day, and that's how they were all. It wasn't like we were buying cheap buses, but that's how they were produced. And we have so many ways to stop this bus going down a mountain road that the other buses did not have.
Would that be a lot for a driver to handle in a situation like that, or
Not
they're
at
pretty
all.
well
They
trained?
Well, training is a huge part of it, and it's very easy to train. It's not a big deal at all.
Great. So the bus manufacturers, does Colorado have to order special buses that other states don't order because of the safety
And
standards?
they do, and they're in all the manufacturers. There's basically 3 of them. Most of ours are Bluebird, but International and Thomas will put the Gunnison package together when they sell buses in Colorado.
Does that make them more expensive?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
By
it's,
$10,000-$15,000.
but nothing considered the safety.
No, that's small.
Yeah. So given all the safety improvements over the 50 years ago and since, you're pretty comfortable that buses are as safe as they can be these days?
I really do, just with the construction of how these are built, transmissions, how we can slow these things down and stop them. I cannot even think of anything that would make them safer.
Talk about your fleet here and how many kids you haul annually or daily or.
Yeah, we have 20 buses. We have right now, we have 6 routes in Gunnison, and we have 3 routes up in Crested Butte, and that's down. We had just because of the bus driver shortage, we normally have 12 to 13 routes. But so all of our buses, we have the commitment of the townsfolk through taxes and our Board of Education and superintendent. You won't see an old bus. I think our oldest bus that we have is like 6 years, and we have a very, very healthy budget for maintenance.
Good. Are there, since the 1971 accident and since the changes then, have there been any other watershed changes over the years that have increased school bus safety, or was most of it a result of the 1971 crash?
I'm going to say most of it's result in no big changes, no really big changes after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much does that, in your work here in transportation and stuff, how often does that crash come up in conversation and in kind of what context?
It's we do a bus safety week at the schools, so every kid in Gunnison will hear that once a year about and Paul Medina and Pat are usually part of that conversation. We'll have an assembly at the grade school level of reliving that moment of what it was and talk about bus safety. So once a year we have that conversation with the kids.
And do you think that's led to better behaviors on buses overall?
No.
No. They're still crazy.
I'd love to say that. Not at all.
Yeah, that's something that you can't legislate, I get.
No.
Unfortunately so.
Yeah.
Good. So for you, is it fulfilling to be working for a district that, because of what happened, has for the last half century put such a high regard and a high price on school bus safety?
And like I said, it's an honor, and to have the backing of the citizens and our Board of Education. It's everything what I do to have that support, and we definitely have it. And they do not want anything other than using that healthy budget to make the kids safe and the driver safe.
Good. Okay. We'll try this, and then speak reasonably loud, just because I don't think there'll be much background noise. So September 11th, 1971. Well, let me back up for a minute. Tell me how old you were then, what position you were playing, and where you were headed.
I was 15 years old, sophomore. I was a running back, and we were headed to Salida to play one of our first games of the season.
Bill, what do you remember about that day in particular? Anything special about it at all, or?
It was just one of those beautiful fall mornings. The sky was blue, the leaves were turning, crisp air. Just one of those perfect Colorado, fall mornings.
So roughly 45 minutes to an hour into the trip, I guess, or maybe a little over an hour, because school buses don't go as fast up the pass as other vehicles. What was your first indication from where you were seated on the bus as to there might be a problem, if anything at all? Do you remember anything about that?
Well, yeah. As we were starting down the pass, almost immediately we were gaining speed, and we just thought, the group of guys that I was with, is that we had a kind of an exciting bus driver, and it was, going to be a fun trip down. So we weren't concerned at that point. About the time we got to the Monarch ski area exit, things were starting to get a little more tense in the front of the bus. Coaches were telling us to just stay seated, stay calm, and so we knew something was going on, and it just kind of was like a snowball. It just went faster and faster, and we could smell the brakes burning.
This viewfinder goes off, and I just freak out that it's not going.
Yeah.
So, what's the last thing you remember before the actual accident?
Well, it was a very vivid memory for me. Watching what was ahead of us. It was my focus. Obviously, the twists and turns in the highway. Are we going to make this one? Are we going to make that one? Certainly had me locked on the front of the bus, and the thing that is imprinted in my mind was coming up at a very rapid pace on the back of a semi that was in our lane, obviously going much slower. And when the driver pulled out to try and pass it on the left, there was a car coming. And my father, who had been very safety conscious as a kid, when we were taking the family station wagon trips, he would have these accident drills that, if he pulled out to pass a car and there was a car coming, this is long before seatbelts, that he would have, us three boys in the back, he'd tell us to get down on the floor, just dive on the floor. And that is the memory that I have, is just like I'm talking to you today, is that voice of my father, who had passed away about 5 years earlier, telling me to get down on the floor.
You recall any particular sounds or anything like that?
It was the sound of a fast-moving vehicle hitting gravel, and gravel kind of spraying everywhere, and then it was eerily quiet until the impact, when we went off the edge and landed. The first time, I think it rolled 2 or 3 times before it finally came to rest.
And do you remember those repeated impacts at all?
I don't. I remember after the accident, and I had managed to crawl my way back up to the edge of the highway. I don't know how much, how long I was there, but at some point a reporter from Salida was there with a radio doing an interview, and wanted to talk with me and asked me how many times the bus rolled. And I told him probably 8 or 9 times, because it just seemed to me like it just wouldn't stop. So I was surprised that when I learned that it had only rolled 2.5, maybe 3 times, it certainly at the time seemed like it was just never going to stop.
Once you, or once the bus came to rest, what's the next thing you remember?
Yeah, my first memory was waking up, and there was a guy who was on top of me that I had just assumed was dead, and the bus was filled with dirt and dust, choking, and you could smell the smell of gasoline, which put the fear of God in me, because every movie that I had ever seen as a kid, car goes off the edge of a cliff and it all of a sudden bursts into flames, and I just did not. I remember thinking, I don't want to burn to death here, and that was my last conscious memory of being inside the bus. The next memory I have, I'm standing outside and had no idea how I got there.
Two things. What was the extent of your injuries, and you feel like, from your observations at that point 50 years ago, were you one of the few people who was ambulatory, up on your feet at that point?
I was one of few, a very few. My injuries, were extremely minimal compared to what others had gone through that were much more severely hurt. I was basically just cuts and bruises and concussions, obviously, but no broken bones. For the grace of God, I was able to walk away.
Fast forward a bit, and I can't remember how long after the accident the memorial service was at Western State College. Did you attend the service at the Wright Gymnasium?
Oh yeah.
Just recollect, if you would, Bill, or recount for you kind of what was going through your mind, and I'm sure you were talking to your teammates and all the ones who hadn't been hospitalized or tragically killed in the accident. What was going through everyone's mind at that point in time to see those 9 caskets, as I did, up in the front of the gymnasium?
It's one of those emotional moments, in your life that it's just overwhelming to see the amount of people that were there attending the service, and the solemn nature of why they were there was just crushing. So seeing the caskets of my friends was extremely difficult to sit through, and I've to this day have suffered with what most people call survivor's guilt, and I would see the parents of my friends and teammates that had died, and I felt guilty that I was there and their child wasn't.
Well,
To be this.
I know, but I was going to ask you, not only from a personal standpoint, but we both grew up in Gunnison, and I think, as I recall at that time, there was about 3,000 people in town, and I've been thinking about it because of this the last couple of weeks. I can't imagine there were many people in that small mountain town who were not impacted or didn't know either one of the players or Coach Floyd personally, would you say?
Sure. It was an extremely tight-knit community. All the guys on the bus I had grown up with. I moved there in 2nd grade, so these were my childhood friends, and knew everybody's parents. Everybody knew everybody else, so it was a very, very tight-knit community.
Hi. I was a freshman, you were a sophomore, so you had 3 years left, I had 4 years left because this is the beginning of the school year. How do you think, when you look back on it, how do you think it affected the high school in those years, and at least in a few years after that, where people may have known the victims of the crash?
You know, it was some very good things that had come out of that. You know, it was very, very, I think, reassuring and just great to see the guys that were critically injured, you know, that, you know, were, you know, very, very close to death and spent weeks and months in the hospital. To see them back in class and, you know, wearing the halos, you know, to keep their skulls together and their necks, you know, straight and their backs from breaking. You know, those were the emotional things that you know, were first, you know, made you swallow hard. You know, thank God that you were still alive, but at the same time, it was so impactful for me to see the wounded, if you will, you know, carry on and persevere and get through this. You know, I can only relate it to, you know, the Columbine shooting, you know, years later. That, you know, there were, you know, a lot of kids that died in that incident, sadly, as well, and many others injured. But, you know, their motto is, you know, Columbine strong. You know, we are Columbine. And for the most part, ours has been Cowboy strong as well. So.
It strikes me as we do this interview here in Glenwood, another town that I lived in for a number of years, and as a reporter I covered the Redstone mine accident, and just across the river the explosion of a natural gas facility, and you know, during my reporting career, countless mass casualty sort of events, and Columbine, of course, is one that's kind of seared in the American memory. Is it important not only for Gunnison but for everyone now, 50 years later, to remember a situation like this, and if so, in your mind, you know, why would that be important?
Well, I think it's always important to remember the tragedy, because if for no other reason, it makes you appreciate what you have and the relationships that you develop, and you know, those are the ones that you really need to cherish. And you know, the friends and teammates that I lost, you know, I never got a chance to tell them I love them, you know, or let them know, you know, just how much they meant to me. So I have tried in my life to not hold back and express myself, you know, and tell people just how much they mean to me. And if I could encourage one thing to come out of this, would be to take the time to do the same today. You know, look around the people that are in your life and what they mean to you, and let them know, because you know, you just never ever know.
Check one more time. With the 50th anniversary, and it's sometimes I hate calling it a anniversary commemoration or remembrance or whatever you want to call it, but the Gunnison High School 1971 Football Foundation, I know you've been involved in that.
Yeah.
What's it sounds like the mission is to do exactly what you've said, is to be sure that by virtue of the foundation and awarding scholarships, that at least in Gunnison RE1J School District, there'll at least be a couple of young people every year who are going to remember this.
That's very important to the foundation, is to identify students that have shown that they themselves are cowboy strong, that they've been able to successfully overcome challenges in their lives and cowboy on and go on to bigger and better things. So we do focus on trying to provide a step up financially for kids that are interested in going to college, and providing them with scholarship funds to make those dreams happen. And that's a big part of why I'm involved. The other aspects that the foundation has been very, very helpful with has been the improvement of school bus safety that everyone even today benefits from. Every family with kids that go to school across the country, as well as here in Colorado, have benefited from the foundation and what has been the positive that has come out of this. Runaway truck ramps, as an example. One of the things that has saved countless lives over the past 50 years. The school bus braking systems are so much better and so much more advanced technically now than they certainly were back in 1970. So there's even a package that schools can order when they're purchasing their school buses, called the Gunnison package, which is a state-of-the-art braking system that would prevent tragedies like this from happening.
In fact, if anyone drives over Monarch Pass and going down the east side, you're probably well aware of that runaway truck ramp before that last corner before you come into Garfield.
Exactly.
Do you think, had that been there in 1971, that the outcome might have been different?
Oh, it would have made an amazing difference. It would have saved countless lives and certainly countless injuries. So it's sad that it hadn't been developed or thought of until after the event, but it's just it touches my heart to drive over these mountain passes and see these runaway truck ramps, and I've seen them being used by truckers that have lost their brakes, and so there's a lot of good that can come out of tragedy, and that's, I guess, what we're trying to focus on now. Raising money for the foundation is our goal at this point, to continue to do the good work.
Let's check one last. But let me ask you one more thing first, and then we'll get into that. Talk about Cowboy Strong. Just in your mind, what are some of the traits of a strong cowboy that the foundation and in your granting of scholarships you try to kind of focus on?
Well, the scholarships are given to kids that have overcome personal challenges in their lives. They don't necessarily have to have been in a horrific accident such as we had, but everybody has got struggles, and the loss of a parent, an illness, things that you have no control over, that we want to recognize those students who have persevered and overcome those types of challenges in their lives, and give them a little attaboy on the financial side, to say, we believe in you and it's going to be okay.
In fact, this year, with the 50th year since the school bus crash, you really have a kind of a lofty fundraising goal. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, my personal fundraising goal, being the 50th anniversary, is to try and raise $50,000 for the foundation. The 50th anniversary only comes along, once in a lifetime. So none of us are getting any younger, and I just couldn't let this anniversary go by without doing something myself to really help the foundation and raise funds and do what I could. So I have made it my mission to create a fundraising bike ride event that will essentially be the return ride home from Salida, from the hospital where we all wound up, back to Gunnison on September 11th, which is going to be a homecoming game. And my goal is to try and get as many people involved in that bike ride up and over Monarch Pass. It'll be a challenge, but it'll be a fun one to try and overcome and show some respect to the lives that were lost, and do a lot of good for a lot of kids for a lot of years.
Have you thought 50 years from now, 100th anniversary at all? And I know that's none of us are probably going to be around, but how do you keep something like this going in perpetuity?
I would hope that there is a way that we can keep the interest and the focus on the tragedy, and find a way to keep it in the forefront of people's minds that this is something that obviously was a tragedy, but so many good things can come out of it that are worth remembering and worth working and striving towards keeping it going. The Cowboy Strong mentality, I don't think will ever leave the Gunnison Valley, and if we can continue that in perpetuity through the actions of people that just won't give up, that's my hope.
One last one. 1971, far different. It struck me when you said that one radio reporter from KVRH in Salida. In this day and age, something like this would happen. You'd have satellite trucks and kind of a media mob up on a Monarch Pass. But it's been often said that for a lot of years, until the foundation was formed, there wasn't a lot of talk, at least publicly, about the bus crash. Is that a fact? And if so, was there a lot of talk internally amongst those of you who were involved?
You're right. It was one of those things that we, as a group, just didn't talk about. I think there was no counseling back in the day, and no support groups or anything like that, which is unfortunate. But we all kind of internalized it ourselves and dealt with it our own way. So it strikes people differently in many different ways today. So
do you think the formation of the foundation, I think they said what, 99? Does that sound about right?
Sounds right.
99.
Well, no, we did it for the 25th anniversary.
25th, so that'd be 96. 96, yeah. For you and others, Bill, has that been a cathartic sort of development? Has that helped everyone heal over the years now?
Well, it was the first time, 25 years later, that we all got together. The players, the parents, the teachers, everybody came out to show their support, and it was, such a powerful time in our lives where it was okay to talk about it. And some of us went back to the scene and did recalled what our experiences were. And I think the key thing that came out of that 25th anniversary was a quote from one of the fellow survivors. His name is Kent Jackson, who has since passed, but he said, guys, we all share an unbreakable bond that will never go away, no matter what happens to any of us in our lives. We will always have this, and we will always know that we were able to overcome it. And by God, he's right.
Okay, thanks, Bill.